Hey everybody, welcome to another video, and well, tonight we're going to talk about Stephenie Meyer's The Host. So this one's got kind of a funny story behind it. Now, Meyer, of course, wrote the Twilight series, and I found The Host in a bookshop while I was on vacation. I believe this was in 2010, 2011-ish, so about 10 or so years back. And at the time that I found The Host, I had just finished the Twilight books. And because I was on vacation, and I mean, we were at the beach, so I hadn't really brought any books with me. I wanted something to read. And I saw this and thought, oh, well, I enjoyed the Twilight books to a point. I mean, I thought they were okay. They weren't great, but they also weren't terrible. And so what I ended up doing was I saw this, I read the back, I liked what I read, and I thought, oh, okay. So it was kind of an impulse buy at that point. But I spent the next sort of 2 or 3 days just flipping through it and reading pretty much all day. And since that first initial reading, I've actually read this particular book. I've lost count of how many times I've read it. Several times. I've read it several times. It is actually one of my favorite books. It's just an interesting read. The story, and here's the thing, this was a book with a science fiction concept that I really hadn't seen at the time. I mean, I'd read alien invasion stories before. I'd read like War of the Worlds and a couple of others, but this was a story that was, at least to me, unique. It was something I'd never read conceptually before. I thought, why not give it a shot and see what it was? So the story here follows, it's set in this sort of alternate future where the Earth has been invaded by this alien species called souls, and basically these things they've been implanted into human bodies. Think Invasion of the Body Snatchers, and you'll have kind of an idea of what's going on. The funny thing is that these guys are ultra peaceful. They don't like violence. They are terrified of ordinary humans. There are some humans out there who haven't got souls in them. Souls being the aliens, not like souls in the typical sense of the word. But the book follows one particular soul who ends up in the body of a girl. And typically when these souls are put into a host body, the host's consciousness vanishes. It's basically wiped out. The only thing that's really left is I'm not sure about this, the grammar on this one. It's late, cut me some slack here, guys. But the only thing that's really left are the memories that the host body had, which is an interesting concept. But this particular soul finds that her host body's consciousness, the girl whose body she's taken over, Melanie is still there, which kind of makes things more complicated because she's having sort of these flashes of Melanie's memories, and the two of them end up having to kind of they have to learn to live and work together. And when they end up among one of these sort of pockets of ordinary humans, they have to kind of really work together to keep themselves alive, because the ordinary humans don't like the souls very much, which was, I think, just a nice touch. So that's the general story. I think in terms of pros and cons, I want to start with the positives. As I said at the start of the video, the concept is very interesting. The idea that an alien invasion happens where the aliens just kind of, sneak in and take over the world while no one's looking is just... It's interesting, but it's also terrifying. Because you think alien invasion or invasion in general and you think violence. But this particular species of alien life form, they shun violence. In terms of the characters, the characters are likable, sort of. Not all of them are very well developed. I personally thought that Melanie and the character of Wanderer were probably the best developed characters in the book. But then again, that's the protagonist, so of course they're going to be the best developed. The story's focus is largely on the relationship between Wanderer, the soul, and Melanie, the host body, and them kind of trying to figure out where they stand here, which fair enough. That's kind of where it should be. With regard to Stephenie Meyer herself, to me, this is the book where she kind of came into her own and found her groove. The first Twilight, the first Twilight novel, and in fact the whole Twilight series, it felt kind of like a learning curve. She starts off and she's a little bit unsure, but as she progresses through the series, she starts to kind of figure out where she's going. And this, at least to me, this is the book where she sort of found her groove, for lack of a better description. It's much easier to read. It flows much better than the Twilight books. But with that said, it's easier to read than the Twilight books, just in general, at least in my opinion. But the pacing is kind of all over the place. 1 minute it's breakneck speed, and you're reading this and going, oh, what's going to happen next? What's happening? And then it grinds to a halt, and suddenly you're stuck because you don't know what's happening, and the book just kind of becomes a slog. It becomes kind of dull for a while, which to me is kind of irritating, but at the same time it kind of makes sense as well. You do kind of want that sort of breathing period. I just wish they weren't so long. The characters if we can go back to characters for a second, as likable as they were, for the most part, as I said, they were very likable, but they aren't very well developed, apart from Wanderer and maybe 2 or 3 others. But worse than the lack of development is the lack of character motivation. You know, there's no sort of clear-cut setup here. Everybody's kind of all over the place. 1 minute, there's a character at one point who tries to kill Wanderer, and by extension Melanie, in one sequence. The whole thing goes south, and he ends up being saved by her, and suddenly the two of them are buddy-buddy. You know, just a little while later in the book, they're like buddy-buddy, which it's kind of it felt a little bit off, but beyond that, it's all right, I suppose. I only really have one other sort of problem, and this is more of a nitpick with me. If I'm going to read something like this, where I'm dealing with whether it's vampires or aliens or something like that, I want to know about the alien species. This book, as good as it is, they don't really tell you much about the souls. They don't tell you where they came from. They don't tell you. You don't really know much about them. You don't really learn much. Which, to a point, it makes sense, because something that you don't know is far more frightening. It's a little bit more threatening, but at the same time, these are creatures that are just ultra peaceful. So, where did they come from? Why did they come to Earth? How does their society work, apart from the whole utopian setup? None of this is really explained. It's like the concept of, the aliens have conquered Earth is it seems like that's pretty much as far as the society part of things went. You do get a little bit of explanation on the alien biology, and some other stuff as well, but you don't really get much, which is kind of a shame. With all that said, in spite of the lackluster character development, the ill-defined character motivations, for all its flaws, I don't think this book is as bad as it's been made out to be. It has some serious problems. The pacing is erratic, to put it kindly. Lackluster character development, a lack of information on the aliens themselves. So you don't really understand what makes them threatening, if anything. But with all of that, in spite of all of the flaws that this book has, it is not as bad as the initial reception. When this book came out originally, it was critically panned. It was financially, it was successful, but the critics kind of hated it. And I mean, I personally really enjoyed it. I don't know how a lot of other people who reviewed the book have not enjoyed it. But to be fair, I mean, that's their experiences. Everybody's going to have different experiences with this particular book. It's funny because this particular book seems to have garnered something of a more mixed reception in recent years. I found some positive reviews for the book. I found far more negative ones. And a lot of those negative reviews do kind of highlight and focus on the negative points that I've raised, and then bring up some other ones as well. But I personally really enjoyed it, and frankly, I don't think it deserves the hate that it gets. You know, you hear a lot about, oh, so and so is just a hater, right? I don't think that's the case with all the negative reviews for this book, because a lot of the ones that I've seen, they are raising legitimate issues with the book that I've seen, but that don't really bother me enough to really list them in a review, if I'm being very honest. Yeah, hey, it's a book to kill time with, and that's my thoughts on the Twilight series as well. Is that it's a series to kill time with. It's something to read when you're bored and you have nothing else to read, right? Personally, I think The Host is better written than the Twilight series. Although, I mean, to be honest, I could be in a minority on that one. So, yeah. To me, it's a fun book. It's an easy read that's designed to kill time. And I've said it a couple of times, I'm going to say it again, I don't think it's as bad as a lot of the critics have made it out to be. I don't think it deserves the hate that it gets in some places. A lot of it is justified, I will admit, but a lot of it is also kind of just, oh, well, everybody else hates it, so, But yeah, I don't think it's that bad. And I would definitely recommend it. If you haven't read it, give it a shot. I would recommend, maybe borrowing a copy from a friend of yours. If you don't want to buy a copy for yourself, or take it out of your local library. Yeah, it's definitely a book I can safely recommend. I thoroughly enjoyed it, and now I'm curious. I want to know what you guys think. Have you read the book? What did you think of it? Did you like it? Did you not like it? Why? Why not? Yeah, I guess that's everything. Thanks for watching. I'll see you for the next one. Bye, guys.